Hello, and welcome to the video about making your periodic table of elements book. This book and this video is going to be a little bit different than the other ones because you're going to have to stop it every once in a while to do the things that I'm telling you how to do, and then start it again when you're ready to go. So depending on how quickly you can do some of the stuff I'm asking along the way will determine how long it takes you to actually do this video and this assignment. When we start, please make sure that you have your printout of the periodic table of elements, and you're going to start with this page, the helium page, the page that just has the column on the far right hand side. And you're going to need some colored pencils and a pair of scissors for this. So please make sure that you have all of that stuff ready, and once you're ready, you can continue with the video. Okay, so if this is our first page, then the first thing that I would like you to do is to color the line of elements pink. So when you color your first page here pinkish purple, please make sure that you color it lightly enough that you can see all of the element symbols and their numbers on it. And then we're going to use the rest of the paper here to fill in with information about periodic tables and in general, and this particular column as well. So when we're talking about the periodic table, some of the things that are important to know about are the fact that, let's talk about vertical lines first, or vertical columns. Each of the vertical columns on the periodic table is called a group or family. This information that I'm putting onto my periodic table here for you to look at is what you should be putting as notes into your onto your paper. Okay, so that you will have it for this class, and then later on when you take a chemistry class, it will be useful as well. So the vertical columns are the groups or the families. They are, or all of the elements in them have similar physical and chemical characteristics. Each group has the same number of valence electrons. And I will talk about what valence electrons are in a little bit, but for right now, let's just put it down. So they form similar types of bonds with other elements. So this is our first group that we're looking at. In fact, this is group 8. Sometimes it's called group O. So not only do we have vertical columns in a periodic table, but we also have the horizontal rows. And the horizontal rows are called the periods, thus the name, a periodic table. Elements in the same period have the same number of electron shells. And again, we'll get into some more detail about what that actually means in terms of being a shell shortly. The other thing that's interesting about periods is the fact that typically as you go down in period, the reactivity goes up. What this means is that things become more and more reactive as you go down in a period. Okay, so now we have to add some information on here about this column in particular, this particular group or family. So since I have colored my periodic table on paper pinkish purple, I'm going to quickly do one here too. But also, I want to give you some information about this particular row. Now, one of the things that I have found useful in doing these previously is to make sure that these pages stay color coordinated. So not only are we talking about the periodic table in general, but let's be specific about this particular row. So on this row, in this column rather, not this row, I know I've been talking about row, I apologize. In this column, what we are talking about is we are talking about group O, also known as group 8. So on your periodic table, you can go ahead and put the letter O as well as the number 8 above your column. These are nonmetals. They are also a particular kind of nonmetal. These are the noble gases. They are odorless and colorless. They have very low chemical reactivity. They have 8 valence electrons. And their melting and boiling points are very close together, with the change in difference between when they melt to when they boil only about 10 degrees. So one way you can keep in mind and remember what this column is in your periodic table is this right here, the fact that they have low reactivity, and they're called noble gases. This is because the nobles don't like to mix with other people because they're just not common, and they don't want to have to mix with the commoners. So the noble gases are very low reactivity, and they are not interested in mixing with other chemicals. In chemistry terms, it's because they have 8 valence electrons, but we'll get back to that in just a minute. Okay, so this is what we're going to put on our first page. So go ahead and take this page and just set it aside for a moment. You will notice that now on the next page up, it has 2 columns on it. One with F, starting with F and going down to TS, and the other with these funny symbols on it. These funny symbols are an indication that we want to get rid of that part. So you're going to take your paper, you're going to not really fold it, but just hold it at a bend like this, get a pair of scissors, and you're going to cut out that area that has the funny little shapes in it. Okay, so I'm just going to snip it while it's folded, then open it up. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut that rectangle out. Now it's really important that you do a good job cutting this rectangle out. Do not make the cut lines go to the edge of your paper. Okay, the goal is to cut a hole in your paper with no slicing to any edges. So I've taken my little strip out, and now you see that I have a hole in my paper of a vertical column. I'm going to pick another color, and I'm going to color in this column of chemicals on my periodic table. And this time it can be any color you want, really, it doesn't matter. It's just up to you to pick a color different than what you did on the last one. So take a minute and color your paper, as I will, and then we'll start putting information on it. Okay, so on this page, where we have F through TS on it, I am going to choose to color this one blue, just because. And so, again, in doing so, make sure that you choose a color that is going to allow you to color the boxes without making it so dark that you can't see the information on there. And then I want to put some information in here about this column. This column is called Group 7A. Oops. 7A. So right above your F here for fluorine, you can write 7A as the label for your group. Group 7A, they are also nonmetals. They are a group called the halogens. Now, halogens technically mean salt producing. So guess what these chemicals form when they form in a chemical reaction? Yes, you guessed it. When they react with metals, they form salts. all sorts of different kinds of salts, not just table salt, but all sorts of other kinds of salts as well. This group has 7 valence electrons. Valence electrons basically means how many they have in their outer shell, but we'll get to that in more detail in a little bit. They are solids, liquids, and gases at room temperature, which means unlike the noble gases, depending on which element you're looking at here, you could find them in any one of these states of matter. However, they form acids with hydrogen. When they form acids with hydrogen, notice I write H2, and we'll get to that later, but it's because hydrogen is never found by itself in nature. When they form ions, they form negative ions, which are called anions. And you can think of that as a negative ion. I know grammatically it doesn't make sense, but it works in terms of keeping up with what you're talking about. So anions are negative ions. This is group 7A. Okay, so now that you have group 7A colored and written about, you're going to go to the next page. The next page is this one that has 2 columns with the funny shapes in it, and then almost like a staircase down, starting with B at the top and going down to TE at the bottom. You are again going to cut out the space so that when you look at, sorry, that's backwards, so that when you look at it, you will see the cutout space, and then you're going to pick another color to color your elements with. I chose green. They're all going to be the same color. That whole number of rows are going to be the same color. Notice also that when you look up here, the columns are labeled 3A, 4A, 5A, and 6A. All right, so 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So again, pause for a minute, color your next part, and cut, and then come back when you are ready to write some more. Okay, so now that you've gotten this third page cut and colored, let's go ahead and get some information on this. As you can see that I've chosen yellow, no I haven't, I've chosen green. In these groups, these are groups 3 through 6. They are not the complete groups 3 through 6, but it's most of the groups 3 through 6. These are also nonmetals, like we've been talking about so far. They are non-lustrous. They are poor conductors of electricity. Which means, of course, that they are going to be dull. Some are gases at room temperature, in particular oxygen and chlorine. Sulfur, however, is a brittle solid at room temperature. Bromine is a fuming dark red liquid at room temperature. So, a wide variety of what they look like. However, they are all nonmetals. They are grouped together here because of that, and because they're poor conductors of electricity. They have 3, 4, 5, and 6 valence electrons, respectively. So group 3 has 3 valence electrons, group 4 has 4 valence electrons, group 5 has 5, and group 6 has 6. So they have 3 to 6 valence electrons. At this point, we have gotten to an area where the periodic table gets a little bit complicated and does not follow the pattern that we would like it to follow. So one of the things I would also like you to do at this point, before we go on to the next page, is with a dark pen or a highlighter or something to that effect, make it fairly thick, and it can be whatever color you want, really. Go ahead and draw around the bottom of these steps. Okay, so you're going to make a barrier here. And this barrier is going to become important, so make sure it's thick enough for you to see. And then we're ready for our next page. And you will notice on our next page that it's a little bit different than the ones that we've had so far. So on the next page that we're going to be looking at, we have got a large amount of elements on here, and we've got a not so large amount that we need to cut out. But you do need to cut these out again. Don't start coloring like crazy yet, because there's 3 different sections that you need to color. So go ahead and cut this section out first, then tune back in, and I will tell you what you need to do for colors. Okay, so go ahead and hit pause, cut that section out, and then come back to me. So again, you want to make sure that you have cut it so that there's no rips all the way to the edge. Okay, now in this area you're going to need 3 different colors. You're going to need one color and they have to be distinguishable. So you're going to want one color that you finish off the right-hand side staircase with this. So I'm just going to outline here what you need to color in this first color that you're picking. So you're going to outline, you're going to color in this whole section, one color. Then you're going to color in all of these down here in their separate, section, and most of the rest of these in a second color. So you can see here that you got to color this whole bottom 2 rows, and then this big rectangle here. You're just going to ignore the last column on the left. This last column on the left is going to be your 3rd color of the page. 3 colors. One on the right, one on the bottom and through the middle, and one on the left. So again, take a minute and color in those sections. Make sure you have your cutout nice and neat, and we will come back to talk about what this is all about. All right, so let's start over here with this group that we had outlined earlier, and you will have colored all these here in. This group here is also part of groups 3, 4, 5, and 6, just like the other half was above it. They are metals. So this group up here are metals. Something really important about this step. So on the page before, I had you highlight this step here going down. The reason being is because that area, those elements above and below that line, mainly on the top of the line though, are called metalloids. Okay, what that means is that a metalloid is something that is brittle, that can conduct electricity in certain situations. So they're brittle, conduct electricity sometimes. Try and do a better job of fitting that in on your paper than I just did on mine. So again, what I'm talking about right now for being the metalloids are the ones that really are here, that are situated around that line. So that line matches up with the page before. Okay, So those are the metalloids. They are metals below the line. They are nonmetals above the line. The ones that are at the line can act as either, which makes them really sort of unique. And then we have this whole section, everything on this page, the thing that all of the elements on this page have in common is that they are actually all metals. So these are all metals, which means they have high electric conductivity and high luster, which means they're shiny. They are also ductile, which means you can make them into wires. They are malleable, which means that you can flatten them into sheets. With the exception of mercury, they are also all solids at room temperature. Okay. The interesting thing about these metals is that there's so many of them. Most of the elements that we come across and that we are familiar with and use are actually metals. Very few are the nonmetals. Now we've got a couple of other areas here that we need to look at in particular. One, of course, is the dark area that took up so much of the space. That included these here. And all of these down here. Okay. Now, the ones in the middle and the ones on the bottom do not follow the rules of the periodic table, which is part of the reason why they are sort of in the center here by themselves. These are called transition metals. This bottom section here, these bottom two rows here, the electrons fill the shells strangely. I'm not going to get into that detail right now, but you're going to know that all the rules we're going to talk about electrons later do not apply to these ones on the bottom. They can form compounds with different colors, which means that you can mix this with something else, and one time you'll get one color and another time you'll get another color, which makes it pretty wild. They have very high melting and boiling points, and they have very high densities. Which means that as a type of a metal, if the boiling point and melting point is very high, then that means that we find them as solids at room temperature. The last group on here is this column on the far left. This column over here are the alkaline earth metals. Alkaline earth metals. Alkaline earth metals are obviously metals that are found in the earth. The alkaline earth metals are things that we will talk about in just a second. Number one thing about them is that they are fairly reactive, so they are only found in compounds and minerals in nature. All except beryllium react very strongly with water. All but beryllium. React strongly with water. And they are all soft metals. Which means that you can do a lot with them. It's easier to work with them than with others. Okay, so now at this point in time, you have probably noticed that our pages of our books fit together. So if I take all of my pages and I start with the first page that I did of helium being at the back, and then I just layer them on top. You can see that as we start from the beginning, we have started at the far right-hand side of the periodic table with group 8. We then added group 7, and now we have added part of group 3, 4, 5, and 6. And finally, we have added some more. Oops, let me get that nice again. So we have added the rest of groups 3, 4, 5, and 6. But I haven't told you what number this is over here. All of these transition metals in the middle, we do not give them a group name because they don't follow the rules of grouping that we are typically looking for. So what we do instead when we are numbering them is over this side again is 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. These, if we are going to number them, they're numbered with B's, so we're going to ignore them. And then over here, above our last column so far, above our alkaline earth metals, we have group 2. So go ahead and put a 2 above that, a 2A above that, and that is group 2. So we're coming around basically with a flip book, with a hidden, with windows in it, so you can see everything together. So, you guessed it, next page up, you have to do some cutting and some coloring. Now notice this is our last page. There's lots and lots and lots of cutting and not much coloring. So you have to be super careful here that you do not cut right out to the edge of your paper, or you're going to lose this paper and it's going to not sit well in your book. So after you have gone ahead and cut it all out, come back and I will tell you what you need to do some coloring. Okay, so you've cut out all the area with the squiggle lines on it. Now, in order to color this, you need 2 colors. First thing you need is the color that you used on group 8. So whatever your coloring was on the very first page that we colored, you need to go back to that, and you're going to color just hydrogen, that color. Okay, whatever your very first color was, you're going to color hydrogen that way. The rest of them you're going to color yet another color. So pick another color that you have not yet used. I don't think I've used red on any of mine. And again, make sure that you can see all the information in this section when you color it in. This is group 1A. The reason that hydrogen is colored differently is because it acts more like a noble gas and does not want to do anything with anybody than it acts like group 1A. Group 1A are the alkali metals. They are shiny, soft metals, which means that you can cut them with a knife. They are very reactive, especially with air and water. Which means that if you're going to handle these chemicals, most of the time you have to have them in a sealed container so that they don't have the opportunity to react with air and water. And you might think, well, air is air, but remember there's always humidity in the air, so there's water in the air as well. And if they do react, they will oftentimes explode. Not always, but some of them do. Because they are in group 1A, I'm sure by now you have guessed that they have 1 valence electron. They tarnish in air. They tarnish in air, those that don't explode. They are found in salts in nature. They are never alone in nature. And they also have very low densities. So now you notice that we went from having nonmetals on the right-hand side of the periodic table, very, very low reactivity, all the way now we're at the other side of the periodic table where we have metals that are highly reactive and that they have very different characteristics from the nonmetals. I will post something about some more similarities and differences between metals and nonmetals, an article probably that is going to be important for you to understand some more of these differences. So now, if you take a look, the last page that you have from your printout that you have not yet used is your title page. So go ahead and put your name on it so that, not that you're going to lose it, but so that you know that it's yours. And again, this book can be very helpful for you in future chemistry classes and in this chemistry class. And we will add some more to this as we go through chemistry. So now what you do is, after you've put it all together, you can go ahead and staple it down the left side. And then you will have a periodic table of elements book, where when you open up the very first page, you can see that you have a full periodic table, complete with the chemical symbols and the numbers. And again, as I said, we're going to be talking some more details about other things to add to this as we go on. Bye.